Hello and welcome to News Centre. I'm Parikshit Luthra. The union government is likely to propose a 3-slab GST structure which will do away with the 12% slab. Sources tell CNBC-TV18 that the centre could make the proposal at the next meeting of the GST Council. The council is expected to meet by the end of June or in July. Timsi Jaipuria has more. Timsi, tell us more about the centre's proposal, and will rate rationalisation finally become a reality?
Well, in what could be a major overhaul of India's indirect tax regime, the government is likely to propose a simplified 3-rate structure in the GST regime in the upcoming GST Council meeting, potentially eliminating the 12% slab. Sources tell CNBC-TV18 that the centre wants to consolidate the current 4-tier structure system into a streamlined structure aimed at bringing in simplification in terms of rates. Sources say that the plan is to shift essential items under the 12% slab down to 5%, while the less sensitive items may go up to 18%, so that the tax burden for the common man is not increased. While the centre feels confident because of the robust GST collections that are now hovering at 2 lakh rupees per month, making the proposal ripe enough for the consideration of the GST Council. But important to note is that the proposal still requires a unanimous approval from the GST Council, which includes both centre and states nod. And this is exactly where this proposal has fallen flat in the past too. As of now, the group of ministers on rate rationalisation has informally backed the removal of 12% slab, and states haven't received the proposal in writing, a procedure which is must before any council takes decision. But the centre feels the rejig of items in 12% slab could keep revenue neutrality in place, which is also a key concern for either adopting or rejecting a proposal. As of now, no date is final for the council's next meet, but sources say that the council is expected to meet before July 21st, that is when the monsoon session begins. And this proposal could be debated intensively in that council meeting. So something that we'll have to wait and watch as to when the council meets and whether this proposal actually makes it to the council.
To take this discussion ahead, I'm now joined by MS Money, partner GST, Deloitte India, and Saurabh Agarwal, partner at EY India. And we will also be joined by Karthik Money, partner indirect tax at BDO India shortly. Let me begin with you, MS Money. MS Money, we've had numerous discussions on rate rationalisation of the GST. This has been a long-standing demand of the industry. Now, considering the speed and the flurry at which the meetings have been taking place at the Finance Ministry, there is a lot of representation from the industry before the government, a lot of interest from the government to hear the industry's view before the next GST Council meeting. Do you feel that we could possibly see movement on rate rationalisation at the next council meeting?
I certainly think so, and I think so for a couple of reasons. The first reason is that the 12% rate, when it was introduced, was intended to be some kind of a transitionary rate, intermediary rate, etc. It was never intended to be a rate which would prevail for a very long time. But we have seen the rate continuing, and we are now going to enter the 8th year of GST. The rate is still around. In terms of the products that are under the 12% rate, as it was mentioned earlier, they can certainly be fine-tuned and moved, some to the 5% rate and some to the 18% rate. The other aspect is that over the last few months, GST collections have been very, very stable. 2 years back, we used to have a 1.4 trillion GST collection being labeled as stable. Last year, it went up to approximately 1.84 trillion, and this year has started with a 2 trillion average. So if the GST collections are stable, then the concern in respect of the revenue impact of any rate rationalization that happens comes down to that extent. The worry that the policymakers will have on how is this going to impact the revenues, are we going to see a big revenue deficit, is going to go down. Here we also need to bear in mind that the 12% rate is the slab at which there are not too many products which are classified. The number of products that are classified on the 12% rate are significantly lower than the ones that are at 18% or at 5%. So in any case, if a balancing exercise is done by moving them again in a revenue neutral manner, some to 5% and some to 18%, in that case, this is something which will significantly ease doing business in India by having fewer rates of GST in India.
Right. Important point there. Saurabh, if I could get you in, how many of the products under the 12% rate do you expect to be moved to 5%, and how many could be moved to 18% according to you?
So, Parikshit, if you look at some of the products which are currently getting classified under 12% are more in the nature of processed and packaged food, dried and preserved foods, beverages, household items, stationery and accessories, footwear, diagnostic kits, construction material. I personally feel, many a times I have made this particular statement that as India is growing up, per capita income has increased. What is happening is our preferences are increasing. What was earlier a comfort has become a necessity for our common mass. So I do foresee, at least into the food product category, there should be a significant movement from 12% to 5%. Likely when I look at maybe somewhere around the household items such as maybe umbrellas, furnitures, there can be some movement in those particular areas. Other areas can also include some bit of maybe insurance is something which I'm looking forward to. I don't know whether there will be a consensus which will be built on the insurance or not. That's something which has to be watched out for, because when we look at the current common mass in India, the term insurance, health insurance, all these insurances are currently subjected to a 18% rate of GST. And in a country like India, where people have not, you can say, subscribed for these insurances in the past, if we are able to bring down the rate of tax on insurance, at least it will bring down the cost, and the common man will more and more adopt these particular insurance, which will help them in the overall contingencies which may arise in future.
All right, important points. Let me go back to MS Money. MS Money, when we speak about rate rationalization, an important ask from the government, but how will the states respond? The problem has been, yes, the centre understands the importance of rate rationalization. This was the original intent also of the GST. But how do you get states on board? And do you think a lot of this exercise to convince the state governments will have to happen outside the GST Council meeting and in the run-up to it?
Look, I think the revenue collections, which have been good over the last 6 months to 9 months, have also benefited the states. When we say the revenue collections in GST are 2 trillion, large part of the revenue also is from the states. And therefore, the states' comfort in respect of any concerns on revenue are also to some extent addressed. In addition to that, a very logical way of looking at it would be to say that when we have most of the milk-related products, including paneer classified at 5%, why can't we move the butter and the ghee also to 5%? Equally, if most of the construction sector related equipment is classified at 18%, why can't we have marble slabs and granite slabs, which are at 12%, moving to 18%? So if we look at it from industry to industry, product to product, I think states will also see a lot of reason and logic which is being provided, because the intention here, more than revenue, is to ensure that from a business standpoint, we do not have multiple rates. We already have a 5, a 12, an 18, a 28. If we just move the 12, we are making progress in making GST simpler. Also, very important point is SMEs and MSMEs have been complaining about the difficulties they have and the challenges they face in dealing with GST. And one reason for that is also the existence of an additional rate of GST, which not only impacts their output, it also impacts their inputs, because on certain inputs they get 5, certain inputs they get 12, and certain inputs they get 18. And these are not tax specialists who are sitting in SMEs and MSMEs. So from a simplification perspective also, I think states can be persuaded very well in the present juncture to agree to a rate rationalization.
All right. Let me also get in Karthik Mani at this point from BDO India. Karthik, we have seen GST collections exceeding 2 lakh crore per month. And as both our guests are pointing out, especially MS Mani, that GST collections are stable, they're healthy. There should be no worry about compensating state governments. There are also issues apart from rate rationalization which are on table. It includes compensation cess, simplification. What do you think? What can be done overall in order to achieve the aim of rate rationalization and yet address concerns of the state governments?
If you had seen, the discussion on rate rationalization is going on from a very long time. If you recall, about a couple of years back, there was a committee that formed, and they had said that they will do rate rationalization for, let's say, a textile sector. And then a lot of lobbying happened, and that entire exercise was dropped. So this time, as Mr. Mani said, that the revenue concerns of the state governments are not there. So earlier, the major concern was revenue for the state governments. Since now that is out of the picture, we should see a progress. And there will be states which will have concerns. But what I see is that more than the concerns, this will help MSMEs to grow. Two, say there are specific sectors, let's say textile or footwear for that matter, where the classification is too cumbersome. It is based on the rates involved. What is the price of the goods? Based on that, they have to classify between 5%, 12%. Especially for MSMEs, this becomes more challenging. So bringing it down to, let's say, 5% from 12% for certain goods, or even moving it from 12 to 18%, if they can create a balance between this, then definitely the states will go for it, and even the industry will benefit from it.
Right. Let me also go back to MS Money. MS Money, there have been other issues on the GST agenda, council agenda, including health insurance, term life insurance. How much ground do you expect to be covered in the next council meeting? Also, the GST on food delivery apps, for that matter.
The next GST Council meeting is going to have a very packed agenda because there are several committees that were formed in the last two GST Council meetings. Some of those committees would have submitted their report. In some cases, the Fitment Committee would have had a meeting. The Law Committee would obviously have had a meeting. So there is a lot in terms of agenda coming from the earlier meetings. On the specific point relating to insurance, as Saurabh mentioned a while back, I think it is time for the government now or the GST Council now to decide that term insurance and health insurance are products which are essential in our country, more so because we do not have a social security system to take care of a large part of the population. And therefore, there is no point in padding up health insurance or term life insurance with an 18% GST, making it unaffordable for a certain section of people. Having that at 5% will really improve things. In the last GST Council meeting, my understanding is it was discussed in detail, but there were some clarifications which were required and some more data was required. Possibly that data will now be ready and they should be in a position to take this decision in this meeting. Just one point on rate rationalization I wanted to mention is when there is an increase in rate of certain products when they move from 12 to 18, there will be a fear of inflation. Because since this is GST, the prices of those goods will certainly increase when it moves up from 12 to 18. But there again, over the last few months, inflation has been very benign in India. And therefore, even from an inflation standpoint, this is the right time to go ahead for a rate rationalization.
Right. And more so because it had been a long-standing demand. And in fact, sources in the government have been saying, and they indicated this post the union budget, that when it comes to rate rationalization, this is something that the government will definitely now work on and try and make sure that there is consensus before the next council meeting. Saurabh, if I were to ask you, the multiple rates have been a pain point for the industry. Now, ahead of this council meeting, what do you think is the biggest representation, the biggest recommendation and request from the industry to the government?
I think, Parikshit, when I look at, while the rate rationalization has been one of the biggest asks, it's not an easy process. The potential for increased litigation and anti-profiteering issues, which might arrive due to slab transition, is an important aspect which the industry needs to look into. It will involve a lot of adjustment in pricing, updating internal systems, managing inventory, etc. At the same time, the industry's ask has been around compensation cess review. Because today it is still March 26 when the compensation cess is applicable. I think there have been deliberations around the same. The reason why the government came up with compensation cess was that it will compensate the states for any loss of revenue which may arise due to, introduction of GST. Now that it has been years after GST has been introduced, there has been no certainty around what will happen to the cess, and it still is continuing as such. Wherein so the industry, and more so when I look at the automobile industry, it is specifically seeking a clarification on what will happen. And the next ask, which of course has been one of the biggest asks of the industry, where the GST Council has been working time and again, has been around the inverted duty structure. Today also, while a lot of things have been done by the government in this particular agenda, textile, footwear, fertilizer are those industries which are continuously facing the challenges arising on account of inverted duty structure leading to cash flow blockages for them and accumulated input tax credit, which in turn is getting passed on to the consumer in the form of higher cost. So I think this is another area where I think there has been a big ask. And I think last one, when I have to talk from an ask perspective, is the reclassification of intermediary services. I think much has been written about it from the global community perspective, wherein you can say brokers, agent, digital platforms have been all asking for a zero-rated export status, wherein currently in case of intermediary services,
Saurabh, right, thank you so much. I've completely run out of time, but I'd like to thank you for joining us. Thank you to Kartik Money and MS Money as well for being with us for such an interesting discussion on GST rate rationalization. A lot of interest, a lot of recommendations from the industry to the government, and the government has also been brainstorming. Let's see what happens over the next few weeks. Moving on, the Reserve Bank of India is set to announce a rate cut decision on Friday. A CNBC-TV18 poll suggests that the central bank will cut repo rate by another 25 basis points in the meeting. Ritu is here with the key expectations. Ritu, take us through the poll, the key findings.
We're going in with the expectation of a hat trick, with the Reserve Bank's Monetary Policy Committee expected to cut rates for the third consecutive time. Now, inflation is tracking well below the RBI's 4% target, and the first quarter numbers are also likely to undershoot the forecast. And so it'll be very difficult for an inflation-targeting central bank to not deliver a cut. Now, while 90% of our respondents to the poll expect a 25 basis point cut in this policy, a smaller section believes a large 50 basis point cut could boost the credit cycle and lift sentiments. The repo rate currently is at 6%, and that is expected to go down to 5.5% in this rate cutting cycle, and that will mark the shortest and the shallowest RBI rate cutting cycle that we've had in over a decade. But a smaller section is expecting the terminal rate at 5.25%. So overall, the market sees space for another 50 to 75 basis points of cuts from here on. Now, most expect RBI will stop the rate cutting cycle by December. Some are even expecting that to happen by August. The GDP forecast for the year, that is most likely to be left unchanged at 6.5%, even as RBI takes note of some of the risks from rising global trade uncertainties. On the inflation front, though, a revision is quite likely, with CPI inflation under 4% for 3 straight readings. A majority of the respondents to our poll expect RBI to lower the FY26 forecast from 4% by 10 to 20 basis points and possibly more, which will support future rate cuts. As for liquidity, most feel RBI has already done enough, and with that record high dividend, core liquidity is expected to stay in surplus in the coming months. So don't expect any big action on that front. But here's what else to watch out for. Any tweaks to the liquidity management framework for one, and there's also been some chatter whether RBI may introduce the external benchmark linked rate, or EBLR, for the NBFCs as well, to ensure that there is better rate transmission. And of course, the street will watch out for commentary on the global macro outlook and how that might affect India. So bottom line is, this is a policy where RBI's rate cut could be predictable, but its guidance and other measures will be what the markets will look at very closely.
And time for a break. But up next, Karnataka High Court issues a notice to the state government after 11 people died in a stampede during RCB's IPL victory celebrations yesterday. That and much more on the other side.